My sister-in-law looked at my daughter's plate and said, "We don't do extra portions for guests who don't contribute," then pushed a basket of plain crackers toward her while her own kids dug into a 3-tiered seafood tower. My mother-in-law didn't even look up from her champagne. She should learn that early, better now than later. The restaurant went quiet around our corner of the table, just for a second, the way a room does when it senses something has cracked open. I heard my daughter, Ren, swallow. She's 11, old enough to know she'd just been told she didn't matter, too young to understand why anyone would say that to her out loud, in public, over a plate of crab legs. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I reached over, put my hand flat on the table, and said, "Noted, before I tell you what happened." 20 minutes later, when the manager walked up to our table and called me by a name none of them expected, "Tell me where you're watching from tonight. And when you get to the part with the bill, tell me what you would have done in my place." The restaurant was called Halcyon, tucked into the Harbor District, the kind of place with a 6-week wait list and a wine list that didn't bother listing prices under $300. My sister-in-law, Brooke, had picked it. She'd called it a celebration dinner, which in our family always meant a performance with a guest list. The official reason was her twins, Aubrey and Camden, getting into the same elite private high school their father had attended. Brooke had been talking about it for weeks, dropping the school's name into conversations like she was seasoning a dish. My husband's mother, Marguerite, had flown in for it. She didn't fly in for much. I'd known for 11 years exactly where I stood in this family. Quiet. Tolerated. The woman my husband's brother, Holt, had married. Not from money, not from the right side of town, not someone Marguerite had picked out for her favorite son. Holt had married me anyway, which Marguerite had never quite forgiven either of us for. Holt was supposed to be at this dinner. He'd gotten stuck on a site inspection 2 states over. He builds commercial properties, the kind of job that occasionally swallows entire weekends, and texted me an apology I already knew wouldn't matter once we sat down. It never did. Without him there, as a buffer, I was just me, and Ren was just Ren. Ren had worn her good dress, the navy one with the small collar, and brushed her hair twice before we left the house. She loved her cousins the way kids love family they don't see often enough to learn the truth about. She'd made them a friendship bracelet each, 2 little woven things in her coat pocket, because that's who she is. That's who I raised her to be. Nobody at that table had asked her a single question since we sat down. What none of them knew, what I had decided 8 months earlier not to mention at family dinners, because some things you keep quiet until quiet stops working for you, was that I owned Halcyon. Not invested in it, not consulted on it. Owned it, outright, since I'd bought out the last shareholder in February and folded it into the small hospitality group I'd built from a single failing cafe 11 years ago, back when nobody in this family thought I'd amount to a place at their table, let alone a deed to one. I hadn't told Brooke where to make the reservation. She'd chosen it because it was the kind of place that signals something, and signaling things was Brooke's whole language. She had no idea she'd booked her dinner inside my house. The hostess who walked us to the table was new, hired 2 months ago, and didn't recognize me out of the blazer and badge she'd only seen me in twice, during interviews. I'd worn my hair down, a soft cardigan instead of anything that said ownership. Tonight I was supposed to be nobody. That had always been my role at these dinners. I just hadn't expected to find it quite so useful. Marguerite took the head of the table like it was assigned to her by birthright. "Let's make this a real celebration," she said, smoothing her napkin into her lap. "We don't get the 4 of us together enough." The 4 of her, she meant. Brooke, the twins, herself. I'd been counted as furniture for over a decade. I'd stopped expecting otherwise. Ren sat beside me, smaller in her chair than she usually seemed, studying the menu like there might be a right answer hidden somewhere in the seafood section. The waiter, a young man named Desmond, careful and quick, someone I'd personally signed off hiring back in the spring, came around with water and the wine list. Brooke ordered a bottle of something French before he'd finished his first sentence. "Wonderful choice," he said, writing it down, then turned to Ren. "And for you, sweetheart, can I get a lemonade?" Wren asked, with extra ice. Before Desmond could nod, Brooke cut in, light and breezy like she was doing everyone a favor. "She can just have water. Tap's fine." Wren blinked. "Oh, okay, we're celebrating the twins tonight," Brooke said, smiling at Desmond like this explained everything. "Let's not turn it into a whole production for everyone." Desmond's eyes flicked to me for half a second. I gave the smallest possible nod. He wrote down water and moved on, and I watched something close in his face, the kind of look an employee gives you when they know exactly what they just watched and are choosing, professionally, to say nothing. The air at the table tightened the way it always did before Marguerite decided to smooth something over by making it worse. "It's nice when we're all together," she said. "Even the ones who don't usually get invited to things like this." I'd heard that tone aimed at me 100 times across 100 dinners. I'd learned a long time ago that defending myself in front of her only fed something in her that wanted to be fed. Wren tried again when the breadbasket came around, going for the second course menu instead. "Can I get the lobster mac and cheese? It looks really good." Brooke didn't even glance up from her menu. "Let's not overdo it tonight, honey. This dinner's for the twins." I looked at her. "She's hungry, Brooke." "Then she can eat something small when we get home," Brooke said, closing her menu with a soft, decisive snap. "We're not really set up to do extra portions for guests who didn't get into anything this year." There it was. Out loud, in a room full of strangers, to an 11-year-old who had nothing to do with anyone's college prep timeline. For a second, nobody at the table breathed. Even the older couple at the next table over went quiet, the way people do when they sense they've stumbled into something they shouldn't watch but can't help watching anyway. Wren stared down at the tablecloth, blinking fast, her ears going pink the way they do right before she cries and tries very hard not to. Marguerite set her champagne down with a soft, satisfied click. "Brooke's right, sweetheart. Tonight's about the twins. We all have our place at the table." There it was again from the other side now. Confirmed, sealed, official. Something in my chest didn't flare. It settled. Cold and clear, the way water goes still right before it freezes. I reached over and put my hand on Wren's knee under the table. She didn't look at me, but she leaned, just slightly, into my arm. Desmond came back with the drinks. Crystal flutes of champagne for Marguerite and Brooke, sparkling water with lime for the twins, who hadn't asked for anything specifically, but had apparently been granted the good water, as a matter of course. Then a plain glass of tap water, set down in front of Wren with a gentleness that told me. Desmond felt bad about it. The sound of the glass against the table seemed louder than it should have been. "Thanks," whispered. She didn't drink it. I picked up my water glass and looked at Brooke over the rim. "Noted," I said. She frowned. "Noted what?" "That I heard you," I said. "Both of you." She laughed, short and easy, already moving on in her head. "Good. Let's not make this a thing. We would not, in fact, be making it a thing, not the way she meant." I let the conversation drift past me. For the next 20 minutes, Brooke narrating the twins' acceptance like a press release, Marguerite nodding along on cue, asking questions designed entirely to be answered with bragging. I watched Wren trace the rim of her water glass with one finger, not drinking, not talking, doing that thing kids do where they make themselves very small and very quiet so nobody notices them being unhappy. There was a version of me, years ago, who would have argued, who would have said something sharp about manners, about cruelty, about what it costs a child to learn. She's an afterthought at her own family's table. That version of me had tried it, more than once, early in my marriage, and learned that arguing with Marguerite only gave her a stage to perform graciousness on, gave Brooke a reason to call me dramatic later in a group text I wasn't part of. Tonight wasn't going to be that. When the appetizers came, oysters, a raw bar tower for the table. Brooke waved Desmond off before he could set a place in front of Wren. "She's fine. She doesn't need a spot for this round." "Are you sure?" Desmond asked, glancing at me again. "Positive," Brooke said. I gave Desmond the same small nod as before. He moved on, but I caught the flash of discomfort cross his face. Quick and gone. the look of someone who knows exactly what's happening and is trusting that I'll handle it. He was right to trust that. While Brooke held court about test scores and admissions essays, I let my mind drift somewhere else entirely. Not away from the table, but underneath it, into the parts of my life none of them had ever asked about. The lease I'd renegotiated in March, the payroll I ran every other Friday, the staff I'd hired one careful interview at a time, including the steady, sharp-eyed young man currently pouring water for people who'd never once asked his name. I thought about how Brooke had picked this restaurant specifically because it said something about who she was, never once imagining it might say something about who I was instead. Ren leaned toward me, voice low. "Mom, can we go?" "Not yet," I said. "But I'm not even." "I know," I said. "Just a little longer. I promise it's going to be worth it." She looked at me for a second, searching the way she does when she's deciding whether to trust an explanation she doesn't fully have yet. Something in her shoulders let go. She nodded. The main courses arrived next. A whole branzino for Marguerite, lobster tails for the twins, a seafood tower refresh for Brooke, because apparently one wasn't enough. Butter and garlic filled the air around us. Ren reached for her water, and I noticed her hand was shaking slightly. I caught it under the table and held it still. "You're okay," I said quietly. Brooke glanced over, suddenly curious. "You're awfully quiet tonight. Everything all right?" "Perfect," I said, and smiled. "Good," she said, satisfied, already looking away. "You take things too personally sometimes, you know that?" "Not tonight," I said. She didn't quite know what to do with my tone, so she changed the subject to summer plans, to a lake house someone was renting, and I let it wash past me. I caught Desmond's eye across the room and tipped my head, just slightly, toward the kitchen. He nodded once and disappeared through the swinging door. The moment was close now. I could feel it, the way you feel weather changing before the sky actually does anything about it. Marguerite was telling a story about the twins' childhood, something cute and embellished, and Brooke was laughing at the right moments, and I thought, quietly, to myself, laugh now, because in about 5 minutes, nobody at this table is going to remember how to. "When the manager comes out," I said, loud enough to carry but calm enough not to seem like a scene, "I want you all to meet someone." Brooke blinked. "What?" The kitchen door swung open and a woman in chef's white stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. Priya, who'd run my kitchens for 6 years now, who'd helped me build this menu from a stack of half-formed ideas into something that earned a 6-week wait list. Behind her, the general manager, a tall, composed man named Desmond, hadn't summoned. That part I'd arranged myself, quietly, weeks ago in case I ever needed exactly this kind of evening. "Everything all right tonight?" the manager asked, stopping at our table. "Everything's wonderful," I said. "I just thought my family should meet the people who run this place. This is my sister-in-law, Brooke, my mother-in-law, Marguerite, my nieces and nephew, and my daughter, Ren." He nodded politely around the table. "Pleasure to meet you all." I looked at him. "Would you mind telling them what your title is here?" "General manager," he said, a little puzzled but professional. "Halcyon and the rest of the Birchwood Hospitality Group. And who do you report to?" I asked. His eyes flicked to me, then settled. "You, Mrs. Calder." The table went still in a way I'd been waiting 11 years to witness. Even the twins stopped mid-sentence. Marguerite's hand tightened around the stem of her champagne flute. Brooke laughed, but it came out thin. "Wait, you mean you work here?" "No," I said gently. "I own here. The restaurant, the building, the company behind it. I bought this group out 14 months ago. Every bottle of wine on this table, every lobster tail, every paycheck that's gone out of this kitchen since February, it runs through me." The restaurant seemed to lean in, the way rooms do when they sense something true is finally being said out loud. A couple at a nearby table exchanged a glance. I heard faintly someone murmur something to their partner. Marguerite found her voice first. "This isn't necessary." "It is," I said. "Because tonight, the two of you decided to teach my daughter she doesn't deserve a seat at this table. So let's be very clear about whose table it actually is." Brooke's face went red, words tumbling out unfinished. "I didn't mean, we just thought, with everything going on with the twins." You told my employee not to feed my child, I said, calm, even, sharper than I'd let myself sound in over a decade. Twice. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was you, showing me, and her, exactly who you are when you think no one's keeping score. Ren looked between us, eyes wide, not sure yet whether to feel relieved or frightened. I put my hand on her shoulder. We're done being extras, I told her, quiet enough that it was just for her. Both of us. I turned to the manager. Could you have Priya put together something special for my daughter? Whatever the kitchen's proudest of tonight. And the good glassware, please. He nodded, already half-turned toward the kitchen. Right away, Mrs. Calder. Brooke's voice cracked. You're embarrassing us in front of the entire restaurant. I looked at her, still calm. That's funny. That's exactly what you tried to do to my daughter 20 minutes ago. Marguerite leaned in, her tone gone pleading in a way I'd never once heard from her. Please. We're family. Family, I said, and let something harder come into my voice for the first time all night. Doesn't sit across from an 11-year-old and tell her she hasn't earned dinner. Family doesn't watch a child be told she's a guest who doesn't contribute, and nod along like that's a lesson worth teaching. Marguerite's face drained of color. I turned back toward the kitchen door as Priya disappeared through it, and said nothing else for a moment, letting the silence do what 12 years of arguing never had. Ren's plate arrived not long after, a small seafood tower of her own, scaled down but unmistakably the real thing, with a side of the lobster mac she'd asked for and been denied, plus something off-menu Priya had clearly thrown together out of pure spite on Ren's behalf, a little chocolate lava cake with a candle in it, unlit, just sitting there like a small private joke between the kitchen and me. Enjoy, sweetheart, Priya said, setting it down herself, and winked at Ren like they were in on something together. They were. Ren's voice wobbled. Thank you. The twins stared down at their own plates, suddenly silent, their earlier confidence gone somewhere quiet to hide. Eat, I told Ren softly. It's yours. All of it. She hesitated, then took a bite, and I watched her shoulders come down from around her ears for the first time all night. It's really good, she said. I know, I said. You deserve it. I lifted my water glass. Not a toast, nothing performative, just a small private acknowledgement to myself, to the years it had taken to get to a table where I got to decide who mattered. Brooke's voice was quieter now, almost stunned. You planned this. No, I said. You did. You picked the place. You picked tonight. All I did was let the lights come on. Marguerite put her face in her hands. Please, just stop. I will, I said, after one more thing. I looked towards the kitchen, where the manager was hovering, and gestured him over. Could you bring the check to my sister-in-law, please? Brooke's eyes went wide. Excuse me? This was your celebration, I said evenly. Your reservation, your wine, your seafood tower, twice. You wanted to be the host tonight. Hosts pay the bill. She fumbled for her bag, flustered, saying something about cards and limits I didn't bother listening to. Don't worry, I said. You can afford it. You did just tell my daughter we don't do extra portions for people who didn't earn them. I'd hate for you to start now. Ren kept eating, quiet but settled, glancing up at me every few bites like she was checking the weather and finding it had finally cleared. Brooke's composure finally cracked all the way through. This isn't fair. I tilted my head. Fair. You want to talk about fair? She didn't answer. Here's fair, I said. You've spent years teaching your kids they're the main characters in every room they walk into, and that other people, including my daughter, are set dressing. Tonight they got to watch what happens when somebody else turns out to be holding the script. Nobody at the table said anything for a long moment. Even the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to thin out around us. Ren took another bite of her cake and glanced, almost shy, at her aunt. It's really good, she said, in the same small voice she'd used to ask for lemonade an hour earlier, except this time nobody told her no. Brooke's lip trembled. I'm sorry, she said. Not to me, I said. She turned to Ren, her voice cracking properly now. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I shouldn't have said that to you. Ren looked at her for a second, then gave a small, careful nod. Not forgiveness exactly, just acknowledgement, the kind an 11-year-old learns to give when she's not sure yet what she's supposed to feel. Marguerite spoke next, quiet, defeated in a way I'd genuinely never witnessed from her in 11 years of marriage. "We should go." "Yes," I agreed. "You should." They gathered their things in a clumsy, silent scramble, the twins' plates still half full, untouched seafood cooling under the lights. People at nearby tables watched them go, not unkindly, just openly, the way you watch weather pass. When the door closed behind them, the restaurant seemed to exhale. Ren looked up at me. "Are they going to hate you now?" "Maybe for a little while," I said. "That's okay. I didn't do it for them." She nodded slowly, then smiled. Small at first, then wider, more sure of itself with every second that nobody took it away from her. "Good," I said. "Now finish your cake." She did, and I sat back and let myself feel, for the first time all evening, something close to peace. Justice, I'd learned, rarely needed to be loud. Sometimes it just needed a quiet table in the back, good lighting, and a perfectly made chocolate lava cake with a candle. Nobody had to blow out, because nothing here needed a wish. We ended up in the small private dining room, off the kitchen for the last 20 minutes, the noise of the restaurant fading into something soft behind the glass. Ren sat across from me, plate nearly empty, the tension finally gone from her shoulders. "Mom," she said, turning her fork over in her hands, "why did Aunt Brooke say we don't do extras?" "Because some people think what you're worth is something they get to decide," I told her. "They're wrong. They've always been wrong." She thought about that, tracing the gold rim of her plate with one finger. "You didn't even yell." "No," I said. "People like that expect you to lose control. The best answer you can give them is showing them you don't have to." She smiled, small and steady. "I'm proud of you. Be proud of yourself too," I said, reaching across to brush a crumb off her sleeve. "You didn't make a scene. You stayed kind, even when nobody was being kind to you. That's the part that actually matters." We left a little before closing. The drive home was quiet. Streetlights sliding gold across the windshield, Ren leaning her head against the window, with her eyes half closed, full and warm, and, for once, entirely sure of her place in the world. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be told where they belong. I stopped waiting a long time ago. I built the table myself, one quiet night at a time, until nobody could push a glass of water toward my daughter and call it her portion ever again. If anyone's ever made you feel like an extra at your own family's table, I want to know, where are you watching this from tonight?